After the lightning victory at Mondovì, the Kingdom of Sardinia is forced to bow. At Tarasco, between 23 and 28 April, Victor Amadeus III signs an armistice. Gueno, Ceva, and Alessandria fall into French hands. The gates of Lombardy swing open, and Bonaparte, secure on his western flank, is free to concentrate the entire army of Italy against Field Marshal Johann Peter Beaulieu, commander of the Austrian forces in Italy. The objective is clear: destroy the imperial army before it withdraws beyond the great natural barriers of the plain, the Po, the Adda, and the Adige, and slips away from a decisive battle. But how will he, with a worn army and inferior numbers, cross guarded rivers, bend enemy rearguards, and turn every maneuver into a masterclass of tactics and strategic vision? On 28 April, he orders La Harpe to move on Aqui-Terme, about 45 kilometers as the crow flies, following the Arrow Valley. But mutinies, sparked by hunger, slow the column. It arrives only on the 30th, when the Imperials have already slipped the noose of encirclement. To keep up the pace and guarantee supplies, Bonaparte concentrates 39,600 men between Tortona, Alessandria, and Valencia on the Po. Here he stages a double feint. From Valenza, he sends patrols towards the nearest fords, pretending an immediate crossing. Farther north, he lets rumors leak of a possible passage over the Ticino to strike directly at Milan. In reality, the main march heads east, towards Piacenza, where the river is less guarded. A shift of more than 60 kilometers that lands him on the north bank of the Po, far from the expected defenses, forcing Beaulieu to hurry his retreat behind the Adda and then the Adige. On 7 May at 9 in the morning, Claude Delamain's picked column, 3,600 grenadiers and 2,500 light cavalry, reaches Piacenza. There, the French requisition local barges and boats to throw, in a few hours, a pontoon bridge able to carry infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Delamain is the first to cross and establish a bridgehead on the north bank of the Po. In the afternoon, La Harpe's division joins him. The Austrian General Liffe holds the bridges of Pavia and watches the fords of the Adda. Beaulieu, who has not fallen for the French feint at Valenza, hurries to reunite his columns to cover the retreat. Between 7 and 9 May, the French consolidate their position and take Fombio. Meanwhile, Auguero crosses the Po at Verato as well, shifting farther east to stretch the front and threaten the enemy flank. During the night of the 7th to the 8th, at Codogno, skirmishes sow confusion in the French ranks. In the chaos, La Harpe is mistakenly killed by his own men's fire. The chief of staff, Louis-Alexandre Berthier, takes control, restores the chain of command, and beats back the imperial advance guards that try to drive the French back over the Po.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
At dawn, on 10 May, the French vanguard reaches Lodi. On the far bank of the Adda, Austrian General Karl Philipp Sabotendorf has posted about 10,000 men with 12 guns covering the bridge. Bonaparte arrays his artillery along the south bank and sends Ordiners and Beaumont's cavalry to seek fords upstream and downstream to turn the position. The Grenadiers' first assault stalls halfway across under enemy fire. The second, led by Delamain and Cervone, breaks through. At that very moment, the cavalry that has found a ford falls on the Austrian rearguard's flank, forcing it to withdraw. The victory at Lodi does not annihilate Beaulieu's army. but it opens Lombardy to Bonaparte. It is proof of an audacious method. Concentrate force on a crucial point, combine frontal attack with envelopment, and break resistance through the speed of action. Five days after Lodi, on 15 May, Bonaparte enters Milan. The city opens its gates without fighting, but the Castello Sforzesco remains in Austrian hands and continues to resist. In those days, an unexpected message arrives from Paris. The Directory wants to split command of the Army of Italy with General Kellerman. The proposal enrages Bonaparte, who threatens to resign. The Directory backs down, and on 21 May confirms full confidence in him, also sending 10,000 reinforcements. While preparing the march against Beaulieu, Napoleon must tackle an internal problem. On 25 and 26 May, uprisings break out in Milan and Pavia and are swiftly suppressed. At Binasco, a village south of the capital, the rebels are scattered and houses are burned. The aim is to restore order quickly and secure lines of communication and supply. With the internal crisis resolved, Bonaparte moves against Beaulieu, who has deployed his 28,000 men beyond the Mincio, left flank shielded by Lake Garda and right by the Po. On 30 May, Bonaparte launches the decisive operation to force the river. He orders a feint toward Peschiera del Garda to draw Austrian attention there, while the real blow lands farther south at Borghetto, near Valleggio sul Mincio, where the crossing is less defended. Once the bridge at Borghetto is secured, French advance guards sweep aside local defenses and open the gap. Caught by surprise, the Austrians hastily fall back behind the Adige to avoid encirclement. Exploiting the breach, Massena enters Verona. Serrier seizes Castelnuovo del Garda and moves on Mantua, while Argiro advances to the northeast to cover the French left. Mantua, ringed by lakes and protected by stout earthworks, is one of Italy's strongest forces and controls direct access to the Tyrol. Bonaparte wants it at once. On 3 June, he assigns Serrier about 10,000 men to invest the city, where roughly 12,000 Austrians are holed up. The Lombard plain is now almost entirely French, but the Austrian field army is not yet destroyed. Vienna prepares a counterstroke from the Tyrol to reopen the road to Mantua. At the end of July, Vienna changes strategy. Dagobert von Wurmser gathers about 50,000 men at Trento to relieve Mantua. Bonaparte refuses to be crushed between Lake Garda and the Adige. On 31 July, he raises the siege and concentrates his divisions to meet the enemy columns separately. West of Gardia, General Kastanovich descends the Val Sabbia, opens Salo, and advances towards Brescia. To the east, Wurmser approaches the Mincio. On 3 and 4 August, fighting rages between the Salo, the Cenzano, and Lonato. Massena exploits the enemy's dispersal and forces Castanovich to fall back. On 5 August, at Castiglione della Stiviere, the combined actions of Auguero, Marmont, and Massena deals Wurmser a clear defeat. On 7 August, the French retake Verona and resume the siege of Mantua. The price is heavy, about 6,000 killed and wounded and 4,000 prisoners, but Austrian losses exceed 16,700. In September, Austria launches a fresh offensive. On the 4th, at Rovereto, Massena and Valboi defeat Davidovich and open the road along the Upper Adige. Wurmser, instead of staying in the Tyrol, descends the Brenta Valley to outflank the French. On 7 September, Auguero passes Primilano. On the 8th, at Bassano del Grappa, the French break the defenses and split the Austrian army in two. One part retreats towards Friuli, the other, with Wurmser, heads for Mantua. On 10 September, Wurmser slips past the French cordon, crosses the Adige, and on the 12th enters Mantua, raising the garrison to about 23,000 men. 3 days later, before the fortifications of San Giorgio and the Favorita, Austrian sorties are repelled by Messina and Saguet. Wurmser remains trapped inside the fortress, already strained. The arrival of thousands more men only deepens the crisis brought on by shortages. Bonaparte can return to maneuver in the open, awaiting the next offensive Austria is already planning. At the start of November, Austria entrusts the third offensive to Joseph Alvensi von Berberich, an experienced artillery marshal called to replace Wurmser after the summer's failures. With about 28,000 men, he moves from the Piave toward Verona, while from the Tyrol, General Paul Davidovich descends with 18,000 along the Adige Valley to strike from the north. The aim is to catch Bonaparte in a pincer and free Mantua. Bonaparte must split his forces. He tasks Valboy with containing Davidovich, deploys Messina between Vicenza and Bassano, and keeps Auguero in reserve at Verona. On 6 November, in the 2nd Bassano, some 19,500 French crash into Alvensi's divisions and are repulsed, suffering about 3,000 losses against 2,800 Austrian. The next day, at Cagliano, Davidovich inflicts a severe defeat on Valboy. 4,400 French losses against 3,500 Austrian. Bonaparte pulls troops back toward Verona to prevent the two enemy columns from joining. On 11 November, Alvensi's guard enters Caldiero. On the 12th, under rain and hail, Bonaparte attempts a frontal attack. Messina on the right, Auguero on the left. Austrian positions, anchored on villages and heights, hold firm. By day's end, the French count about 1,800 losses, including 800 prisoners and 2 guns, against 1,300 Austrian. Victory at Caldiero gives Alvensi the illusion that he holds the initiative. After Caldiero, Bonaparte decides to surprise Alvensi by striking his southern flank. In the night of 14 to 15 November, he concentrates his troops at Verona and marches towards Ronco on the Adige. At dawn, he builds a pontoon bridge and sends about 18,000 men across, entering the narrow strip between the Adige and the Alpone, a maze of embankments and canals where marshy ground hampers large movements and can nullify the Austrian numerical advantage. The battle unfolds over 3 days. 15 November, first day. Auguero advances along the levee toward the bridge of Arcole, but fire from Austrian positions stops him. To outflank the enemy, Bonaparte dispatches General Beaulieu with 3,000 to find a ford at Aboladro. By late afternoon, he enters Arcole. However, news that Valboy has been driven back at Busolengo prompts Bonaparte to bring all troops back to the left bank of the Adige to shield Verona. 16 November, second day. The French recross Adige and resume the offensive. Porciel is taken, but the bridge of Arcole remains in Austrian hands. At the mouth of the Alpone, General Vial attempts a crossing and is halted. Meanwhile, 3,000 reinforcements sent by Kilmaine arrive from Verona to stiffen the effort, but the situation remains deadlocked. 17 November, third day. Bonaparte seeks to end the battle with a decisive stroke. He prepares the final action to break Arcole's defenses and force Alvensi to retreat. Messina places a brigade conspicuously on the road between Arcole and Porciel to draw part of the garrison out, while the rest of his troops lie hidden in the vegetation. Farther south, Auguero moves towards Legnago to threaten Austrian lines of retreat. At this, Bonaparte orders a coup de théâtre. A small detachment of mounted guides and 4 trumpeters ford the Alpone behind the enemy and sound the charge, suggesting the arrival of a large force. Panic grips the Austrians, who abandon Arcole. The victory at Arcole cost the French about 4,500 killed and wounded. The Austrians lose roughly 7,000 men. Bonaparte has beaten back the Third Offensive, and Mantua remains Austrian, yet isolated. The campaign is nearing the decisive Battle of Rivoli, and in the next episode, we'll discover how Napoleon will settle accounts with Austria. Don't miss it. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on the bell to follow the entire series.